What's going on, guys? It's Colteor here, a bit late in real time, but we've got another CI7 Winners Bracket main event narration for you today. We've got Fruhdazi on the left versus Sadly on the right, and this is an interesting matchup. We can look at where these players came from last rounds, because Fruhdazi managed to beat M Dragon, except he was loading mono band, so this is his first CI game for all intents and purposes, and Sadlysius, on the other hand, has just beat ADV's other resident 14-year-old in Arctic. So, time will tell if we're going to see another mono band from Fruhdazi in the inspiration of his fallen opponent, or if Sadly's going to continue the streak and beat ADV's other resident kindergarten student. So, without much more delay, let's get into the game, folks. So, lead matchup. We've got Tyranitar versus Tyranitar. No telling what's going to be clicked here, and a raw Fire Blast hitting the Skarm is pretty out there for what's going to get clicked, but it does work and does hit the Skarm. Fruhdazi obviously going for Fire Blast again to try and finish the Skarm off, but doesn't work. And it's going to get chased out by Brick Break as Fruhdazi goes to his own Skarm and also gets Fire Blasted. So, about as even as it gets after turn 4, with the minor exception of Fruhdazi having 2 spikes, and sadly only just getting his Skarm in now. And Fruhdazi's going to make use of that momentum, go to Zapdos, gets hit by a taunt, which is actually a little impactful. It means it's definitely not going to BP or Toxic whatever comes in. Yep, and that does make Selby a lot safer, not fearing a BP from Doug or Toxic. And it is going to fear a Drill Peck, though. That is quite something. It is somewhat better with spikes, obviously, and it's definitely going to be enough to KO the Celebi there if it stays in. Fruhdazi does predict the switch, however he does not predict it being to an electric immunity. We've got Flygon here. Potentially a Superman-ish team for Sadly, although there's a Celebi, that doesn't really fit. More importantly, though, the Fire Blast misses Fruhdazi's Skarmory as he gets the crucial third layer. So unless there's a spinner, which with Gone, probably not, but with Celebi, maybe. I'd say those spikes have a pretty decent chance of staying. Remains to be seen if Fruhdazi has a spinner or not. He reveals his Swampert, which looks like it has quite a bit of special attack investment. And it does manage to finish off the Skarmory from Sadly's side as it gets its second layer of spikes. I'm going to slow the game down just a speck here, folks. And Celebi chases the Pert out, obviously. Can't really stay in an EHP grass for nothing. And uses that time to recover as Suit Tire comes in for Fruhdazi. It's revealed to be that set, not any fancy mixed tire. Crunch on the Leech Seed miss, very good for Fruhdazi. And now it looks like he's going to fish for a Spadef drop or a crit as the Celebi spams recover. Hopefully, well, goes for a prediction focus punch, and that's actually going to be timed well enough. Does nothing to the Celebi, but with Sand, it's barely going to kill it, even though it's a resisted, pretty weak focus punch. It's going to be good enough, and had Sadly recovered there, or even attacked, Fruhdazi would have looked like quite the fool, but it worked out for him. And here we see a Jirachi coming in to try and force the Tire out, which doesn't make much sense until you realize Tire is seeded and the Jirachi is sub. So no matter what, Fruhdazi's going to have to fight Jirachi with a sub, but it is at least at 50%, and it doesn't have any CM boosts yet. Ice Punch from the Jirachi, so definitely not Grass, or it would have been clicked there, unless he was heavily over-predicting, but the sub's up, so you just attack. Fruhdazi agrees with that mentality. And Hydro Pump and Ice Punch respectively. Jirachi just barely staying alive. It probably would have died if there was an earthquake, but I get it. You want to hit the Gone as well if that comes in. Ice Punch again, and Fruhdazi just leaves the Pert in. It might be chipped if I was going to say if the last was a Metagross or something that likes Pert chipped, but it's actually a Moltres. So, remains to be seen if that Pert chip is going to be getting much value. Fruhdazi massively ahead, by the way. He's got 3 spikes up, which doesn't matter much, other than hurting the Tire a little bit. But he's got 5 Mons to 6 and still 2 unrevealeds to Sadly's all 6 revealed. This might even it up a bit, though. Rock Slide miss. Sadly, obviously got a little bad RNG earlier with the Leech Seed miss, and now he's getting some good RNG with the Rock Slide miss, and that's going to let Moltres actually 1v1 the tire from nearly full, which is quite an impressive feat. And Zapdos still going to make it a game, though. It's slower than the Moltres, actually, but it does have T-Bolt, and it Drill Pecks this Flygon for 43. That's how much I would expect it to do to a Blissey, not a Flygon. Jesus. Rock Slide doing barely more than Drill Peck, but it is going to be faster than the Zapdos, so Fruhdazi definitely not putting enough speed EVs in for this matchup. See if he has anything else faster than the Flygon. He does. He has a Gengar in back, and that's actually looking terrifying. If he has a Grass move for the Tire, the game might actually be over right now. Tire comes in to try and take whatever the Gengar's doing, and whatever it's doing is a Wisp against not Lum. So yeah, that's a potentially either a Suit Tire or a Mix Tire with lefties. Thunderbolt, better hope it's Suit Tire, and it is. Crunches, gets the turn right, doesn't go for the overpredict pursuit on the stay-in, and Gengar's down, and that was looking like Fruhdazi's biggest chance to win this game. So with Zapdos at 16% and being slower than the Flygon and the Moltres, remains to be seen how much speed this Celebi has, but that could easily determine the fate of this game. And the Celebi is also slower than the Moltres, so this Moltres might just wrap up the game right here. Celebi's going to barely live 1, and a Crit Psychic maybe. Crit Psychic would have done it, but it would have probably still been slower than the Flygon anyway. And I think that's it. Fruhdazi can't even hope for a Fire Blast miss. We've got Flamethrower Moltres here. And his Zapdos is slower, and his Pert at 49 with 2 spikes down is absolutely not missing or not living an HP Grass. And even if it does, it's not living the follow-up Flygon EQ. So that's that, folks. Game 1 sadly takes in what was looking like a very bad endgame for him, but he got a little lucky break with a Rock Slide miss, and sometimes that one turn is all you need. And he played well as well. He got the Gengar trapped right when he needed to. And if he didn't get those Gengar turns right, he probably would have lost to it very soon afterwards. Tar would have been forced out, taking just enough burn and spikes chips to be in Thunderbolt range. But yeah, that is what could have been, and what did happen was sadly winning the game pretty convincingly when all said and done. So, 1-0 sadly. Let's hop into Game 2. Of course, I know if there's a Game 3 or not, but we don't, or you folks don't at home. And let's see what happens. Metagross lead versus Tire lead. A lot more cut and dry than last game. And Fruhdazi agrees, just going with a straight up mash into an EQ on Sadly's meta into the Skarmory. So another Skarm from Sadly, and Fruhdazi bringing his own spikes again. But this time he brings Fori, which if there's a Gengar, that'll be helpful here. At least temporarily, until his Suit Tire potentially comes out. Or potentially a Houndoom or Umbreon, who knows? Potentially it's HP Ghost Fori. Well, we're going to see what he has planned for Gengar right here, right now, because Gengar comes in on the Rapid Spin after Skarmory taunts the Fortress to prevent spikes, and Fruhdazi's plan to the Gengar seems to be to ignore it and just click spikes, which, I mean, hey, it worked. Suicune's in, and he's got a layer of spikes up. CM and Explosion. Fruhdazi does not care to deal with this Suicune. He's thinking the last probably, hopefully, isn't a spinner, and I'm fine with my one layer of spikes. That's what he's hoping at this point, and he's going to kill the Suicune to bring it very quickly to a 5-5. And here's a Tire. So we did see Moltres 1v1 T-Tire last game, but folks, that is absolutely not how the interaction usually goes. Focus Punch, and back to Metagross. So funnily enough, if Moltres did HP Grass there, we might have seen a Moltres 1v1 a Tire 2 games in a row, as cursed as that would have been. But it was not to be. We see a Meteor Mash, but it barely doesn't kill. Must be a little bulkier, probably just a BKC Tar. Just barely able to hang on. Tar infamous for doing that against basically any Pokemon in the tier if it's at full health. And sadly takes the lead, but again, just for a second, evens up to a 4-4 with the Moltres again. And there's Sadly's last. Indeed, it's not a spinner, it is a Jolteon, which has not been seen too often this tournament yet. Fruhdazi's special wall is going to be a Porygon 2, apparently, because it traces Volt Absorb, right? Luckily, it didn't need a Toxic or anything on the way in, because there's no natural cure on Sadly's team to absorb that. So any status, like that T-Wave, is going to be permanent. However, it's just as permanent, and dare I say, way more impactful on Sadly's own Jolteon. Unless that's Rest Jolteon, which, let's be honest, folks, it probably isn't. That Jolteon is going to be slower than Moltres all game. And looking at the Pokemon Sadly's got alive, he's pretty reliant on that Gengar being able to T-Bolt it down to even have a chance of beating it. Or, potentially, if this is Fire Blast, well, it's not. I was going to say stalling it out of Fire Blast BP, but that doesn't seem to be happening. So anytime Moltres comes in and Gengar's not in at the same time, it's going to be getting a kill from this point on. Now Gengar is obviously going to chase it out, but here comes Tar, and boom! So sadly, must have been hoping for an overpredict stay-in or something. Unless this is Agility Slide Metagross, which is very possible in this kind of team. Well, there's the Agility, and I say that must have Slide. Is it gonna... Oh, it's not gonna live the Fire Blast. Not quite enough bulk on the Metagross for that, or alternatively, a super special attack invested Tar there. And yeah, Metagross took a little bit too much and was not able to live the Fire Blast. If it did, I'm still not sure it would have won. There's a full health P2 with Thunder Wave, but it could have gotten a Mash Raise, it could have gotten a Rock Slide Flinch. Stuff could have happened if that Fire Blast was lived, but that did not happen, and Fruhdazi wins this one really even more convincingly than sadly won game 2, or game 1. That wasn't a stomp, but that was not close. He got the Jolteon T-Waved very early, and basically from there it was almost over already. Suicune was gone, and Gengar was apparently not long for this world. So Moltres was always looking good there, and the Metagross just couldn't quite get it done against the T-Tar at the end there. So, unfortunate for Sadly, but fortunate for the fans, we've got a Game 3, folks. Now, I'll be taking a drink of water as you folks all sit in your seat and salivate over who could possibly win this climactic battle. Alright, that's enough salivating. Let's get right into it, folks. We've got another new lead matchup. We've got Pert, which is a little uncommon unless it has something like Counter or some other set that's kind of out there. But it gets one of the best lead matchups it possibly can against Mence. Doesn't even have to fear turn 1 boom like it does for Meta. He can just go straight for an Ice Beam and then straight for a crit Hydro Pump. May or may not have mattered if that's off Pert or not, but Magneton is going to die instantly from Fruhdazi there. And that is a 5-6 on turn 2. That is not what you want to see. Additionally, there's a Moltres. Moltres usually with spikes. If the spike was Fortress or Scarm, that's very bad for the Mag team that Fruhdazi has. And to make matters even worse, it tells Sadly that that's probably a CB-Mence. So Fruhdazi massively behind. However, sighing a little bit of relief as he sees the Spiker was in fact not one of the Steel types. We've got Cloyster here, who would of course not be trapped by Magneton, even if it does have to fear T-Bolt. Taking 40% from a Seismic Toss, which is a little ridiculous, but it is going to be able to live 2 of them just barely, and be able to spin away the spikes, and potentially be able to get a Surf off or switch for a boom later. Doesn't opt to boom, which would have prevented Fruhdazi from getting up any spikes. And he gets toxic for his troubles. He could either go for a spike or the third layer of denial, or the boom of denial, rather. Opts to spike first, and then I assume it's just a boom coming down on this turn, even if he protects. Doesn't even protect to try and scout boom, so maybe he doesn't have it, or maybe he just... I don't know. I'm not sure why protect wasn't clicked there, especially if he didn't have it, or especially if he did have it. Well, regardless, Moltres going to come in afterwards and obviously kill the Scarm. Fruhdazi's not going to try and keep it around for any physical threats or get another layer later. Brick Break, and it does do 39 to that pert, so that is definitely an off pert. And, well, Gengar is going to resist Brick Break, and obviously, based on the damage and the mag, you know that's CB for sure, so no worry about a random DD or HP flying to catch the Gengar. Will-O-Wisp coming down for the Blissey, but it's at full, so even if this is a taunt Gar, gonna have trouble 1v1ing it. Could boom instantly, but it opts to not. And we see Wish. Now, the off-pert's obviously going to be faster than Blissey, so it's going to get a... I was going to say it gets a chance to Earthquake the Bliss down here, but Fruhdazi opts to just Seismic Toss. Does have a Wish coming up, so the Earthquake wouldn't have done much unless it got a crit, or that's like attack-invested pert. So maybe just going for the Ice Beam on the Ments predict was a fine play. Fair enough. 4-4 right now, but Fruhdazi does have 3 spikes up on his side and only 1 up on Sadly's side. So Fruhdazi's still a little bit behind, and a Mash Raise from Meta is going to bring him even more behind, but not quite. Meta switches out, doesn't go for a further bit of EQ chip on the pert. So maybe his last doesn't really care so much about chipping pert so much as it does keeping Meta healthy. Fair enough is what we can infer from that. Back to Blissey, and with 3 spikes up, if it keeps switching in on Wisp like this, it is going to be chipped down pretty heavily. Now there's no sand yet. Well, that puts an end to the Blissey chip, I guess. Just goes for the raw boom from Sadly, and now Fruhdazi better have some way to deal with this Moltres. And he appears to be choosing the end the game before Moltres can end me route. And he gets that route planned very well. He goes for the prediction Earthquake against the Moltres, hitting the Metagross. And are you fucking kidding me? That's probably how the game ends, but maybe not, because Fruhdazi has elected to bring nothing but the move Knockoff in his 6th slot. So, let's see if Knockoff the Pokemon can manage to get any work done. Oh, he's not using Knock, he's using the Spin Set, which is incredibly perfectly timed, pulls it out at the last minute after Cloyster's long gone, and he Sword Stances even while burned to try and bring this Blissey down. The Blissey with a CM boost might just kill the Armaldo. Never mind, that thing is quite bulky apparently. Ice Beam at +1 from what's probably a modest Blissey, only doing 27. However, Armaldo's slower? What the? Armaldo's slower despite being a spin Swords Dance set. I might want speed on that, but fair enough, I guess. Hidden Power Bug, despite it being +2 with a burn, that's basically neutral, and that is doing nothing. Even if that crit, that would only be doing 60 to the Blissey. So it can just happily spam soft-boiled at no risk, while the Armaldo slowly dies to burn. He opts to Ice Beam, probably to catch Fruhdazi trying to get cute with a Ments on Ice Beam, or on soft-boiled, but just kills the Armaldo. And Brick Break, he's going to need to use that to kill the Blissey from full. But if he can get a little bit of chip on the Blissey first, ooh, bad prediction from Fruhdazi there, and that might actually be game, folks, if that's HP Grass Moltres. Yeah, Fruhdazi packs it in. He does not had to... He does not have the tools to win after that Wisp hits on the over prediction. He was trying to catch the Blissey. He didn't want to risk it coming in and calm minding against the pert and then getting a kill and then having to get exactly 1 turn right later, but he got exactly 1 turn right or wrong now instead. So that is going to be the end of Fruhdazi in the winners brackets, folks. But He's going to still be on in the losers bracket next week, where Sadly gets a break week after going 2-0 against the ADV preschoolers, as it were. So yeah, that's that so far. Interesting set, I kind of have to say, with the offensive Flygon both showcasing why it's so bad, taking 43 from the Drill Peg Zapdos, and showcasing why it's so good by outspeeding everything in that endgame and being a great backup win con after the Gengar died. And we also had the kind of a demolition that was game 2. The Fortress instant booms the Suicune, and then everything goes downhill from there for Sadly as Jolteon T-waved. And we don't even see Fruhdazi's last mon in this game. You could place your bets on what it could possibly be, but if you bet Aerodactyl or Celebi, there's like a 90% chance you're right. It's Fruhdazi. And other than that, game 3 was probably the most interesting teams of the series, which is always a good sign to see game 3 players don't just default to their comfort. They still want to try new stuff and try an interesting team. And we see a Cloy Molt Gar squad, pretty hard-hitting special attackers, versus a CB Ments Armaldo squad, which I can't say I've ever seen before. Oh, and that's why Fruhdazi lost this game 3. He loaded a Blissey. He doesn't have a great history with that mon, but that's all I'll be saying tonight, folks. I hope you enjoyed my narration, and I hope you're having a great time watching these CI games. I know I have. And that's about it for me. So have a good day, everyone, and I will see you all next week.